Hi everyone, this is Stefan from Oak Security. So we decided to make a quick video on how to prepare for an audit with us. What do teams need to supply to us when they actually ask for a quote, and then when the audit starts, and what's the best way of getting the most out of an audit. So let's dive right into it. It's done FAQ style, right? So first question we get is, when should we reach out? Now, of course, there is a problem that auditors such as us are fairly busy and we have a bit of a lead time. So you should reach out very early. Obviously, if you're too early, it's hard for us to get a quote, but let's say we have a lead time of 2 or 3 months. So 2 or 3 months before the audit start date, you should probably have enough for us to be able to quote. But then again, it's better to reach out too early, and the worst thing that can happen is that we explain how we work, how everything goes, how busy we are, and we'll ask you to get back to us with more details soon after. But better to reach out early, and there's also a lot of things we can help you with early on, like helping set up a secure development environment and processes, and answer questions at this stage. But anyway, at some point you'll be ready to get a quote, and that's probably earlier than you think. We don't need to see a finished project to be able to get a quote, and with lead times that wouldn't be practical anyway. What we do need is to see a fair amount of code, but that can be very early work in process. So we will ask you for access to your GitHub repository or similar things you might have. We need to see some sort of work in progress version, and we need a clear description what is still to be done. So you will probably have a number of smart contracts ready for us to look at. They might not be fully tested, and there might be other smart contracts that are still missing. So we need a specification of whatever is missing. And with this, we should be able to give you a fairly accurate quote. And what you receive as a quote is a price, obviously, a potential start date. Obviously, start dates are to be treated carefully. If you have delays, you should let us know so that we can reschedule as early as possible. Because it's always a bit difficult to get this right. And obviously we tell you how long we need for the audit. So usually that's a price, a start date, and the number of weeks. The number of weeks we need to deliver the first report. Obviously afterwards there's a period where you apply fixes, if there are any fixes to apply, and that obviously also depends on your development speed. But anyway, we need access to the code. We can get NDAs in place, of course, but we need to see some code and a clear description. But it can be early work in progress. On the other hand, when the audit starts, we obviously need frozen code, right? And I'll share at the end of this video, I'll go through a checklist of what should be done to this code so that it's ideal to make the most out of the audit. But it has to be frozen, and we usually ask for you to confirm a commit number. So at this stage, the code should be fully written, fully tested, and fully documented. One of the things we do evaluate in the audit is documentation and test coverage, so that should be as complete as it gets. Ideally, nothing should be changed after the audit start date. Occasionally, if you find a small bug afterwards, let us know as quickly as possible. But we need a frozen version of the code. So obviously, we need the full specification, documentation. Maybe we even ask you for a code walkthrough, depending on the complexity of the project. We have a kickoff meeting where you talk the auditors through certain things. Usually that will be after a couple of days of the auditors already looking at the code so that they can ask relevant questions. And obviously what we also need is your availability, some contact. We usually set up a direct line of communication between the auditors, and that can be Telegram group, it can be a shared Slack channel. We are fairly flexible, but you need to be available for questions. What will happen during the audit? Well, I've already said that you need to be available for questions, but don't expect us to be extremely communicative. If we don't have any questions, we won't ask them, right? If everything is well documented, we generally don't need that many questions. The way we work is we always have 3 pairs of eyes on each line of code. So there'll be several auditors working in an audit. And our process states that they work independently at first. So in the first part of the audit, these auditors will communicate with each other about design and architecture, and they'll ask relevant questions to you, but they won't reveal any findings yet, because that's how the process works, and we find that it's best not to bias each other, and it works fairly well. But it has a side effect that you don't hear about issues until the end or close to the end of the audit, unless we find something catastrophic, right? If that's something extremely critical early on that needs to be addressed because it affects the rest of the audit, then we obviously break this rule of not revealing findings too early. But usually we won't communicate any findings to you before our internal consensus meeting. Having said that, we might come back with many questions. So what will be delivered at the end of the audit? So after the agreed deadline, or on the agreed deadline, we deliver a report, which looks like the audit reports of other auditing firms. We try to be as concise as possible. We won't comment much on big design decisions and things like this, or go into subjective things like coding style and variable naming and that's just opinionated stuff we don't care about. We just list issues, security issues. If we see something relevant to performance that attracts our attention, we might point it out, but usually we'll discuss only security. These issues will be listed according to severity, from critical, major, minor, and informational. And there will always be a clear recommendation on how to remove or how to fix the issue. And this is a draft report which is internal to us and to you as a project. It will not be published. We then have a period, which is usually 3 weeks, where the auditors are available to review any fixes you might wish to apply to address these issues. And then we update the report. And the report can be updated either with a remark that an issue has been fixed, or for minor issues or issues that you don't necessarily agree with, you could acknowledge them, and they're marked as acknowledged. And then we will also allow you to add a team reply. Usually that's a very interactive process, and we reach consensus with the team on what will be published. Usually we agree on fixes. There are some unlikely cases where a team might simply not agree with one of our findings, and that's fine. We allow teams to express their point of view, and we copy a team reply verbatimly into the final report. But that hardly ever happens, but it could theoretically happen, because one of our rules is that the report will be published. And that's the final question here: what happens after the audit and what will be published? So I've just said there's this process where we agree on fixes and things like this, but at some point we have to publish a report, and one of our rules is that the report is always made public to the community. And it's made public under a very specific license, which is a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Derivative license, which means it's in the public domain but cannot be altered, right? So you can do with this report as you please. You can publish it, but you cannot modify it. And this is obviously to guarantee the independent nature of this audit. And we've actually applied this license because most teams have requested to work in this way, because it's the most transparent way of demonstrating independent security review. But this report will be at some point before you go live or when you go live on our GitHub repository, and you can link to it, you can copy it, you can do with it whatever you want. And that basically sums up the process and what we need. Let's just go through a specific example on what we expect to be or what's the best way of dealing with code before you submit it to an audit, so that you get the most out of the audit and the auditors have an easy way of dealing with it. So this here is the COSM WASM checklist. We have a number of checklists on our GitHub repository in our resource section. We will link these under the video, but let's just use COSM WASM as an example here. So obviously we need all relevant documentation, such as white papers, your website link, online documentation, whatever you have that explains the code. We need a commit hash, as I said before. We need the relevant frozen version of the code. We need a description of what should be included in the audit, right? Scope needs to be very clearly defined. You might include some libraries from another project or from the public domain which is already audited that you might exclude from scope. We need that to be very clearly defined. So when the audit actually starts, we want you to do things like removing all compiler warnings, make sure it builds correctly, right? In COSM WASM smart contracts, this means cargo builds, just builds for us. We install it, it builds. No warnings, no errors, everything should just work. Rust code should be formatted a certain way. We recommend you use cargo FMT, cargo format, to format it correctly. That just makes life easier for everyone. We would like you to run Clippy, run Cargo Clipper, Cargo Clippy, right? So that also helps our auditors. We would like tests to just work. As I've said before, we look at test coverage, but tests should pass, and they should be all included and all executable for our auditors. Auditors might actually add additional tests in some cases to check for a certain edge case they have a suspicion about, or to even demonstrate an exploit. But you know, it should be easy for them to work with your test suite. Test coverage is something we can objectively measure, so we include it as a metrics in the audit report. For this, we recommend that you run cargo tarpaulin, just to make sure you are aware of your test coverage and that it's sufficient. And then the other things are, just clean up everything. Make sure that any files that are not specific to your project, like markdowns copied from templates, are removed. That can be quite confusing. If you have documentation from the wrong project that you use that boilerplate still in there, that can really confuse the auditors. And it also doesn't look good once you publish this code. Remove any commented and unused codes, resolve any pending to-dos. The obvious. The code should at this point be finished. We've already mentioned the code trees and the relevant repositories. So this is just one example of the checklists you can find on our GitHub repository. We link the other ones. There's one for Ethereum, of course, as well. And for Cosmos SDK audit, there'll be a different checklist. They're fairly specific, but a lot of it is common sense. So I hope this helps prepare for an audit and clears up some common doubts. We are obviously always available. Our contact details are also linked below the video, and you probably know how to contact us already anyway. So just ask. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks.